Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Spirit Rescue Talk. I am Amy Major, and I have my two co-hosts with me, Cynthia Maroon and Jordan Start. Really excited to talk to you guys today because we're going to talk about things that we know very well about, and that is ghosts. So when we talk about ghosts, there's so many people out there that say certain things, and they talk a lot about the forms of ghosts. And that's true. There are many different forms of ghosts, apparitions and orbs and, mists and things. We're not going to talk a little bit about that. What we like to do is go the extra mile. We like to talk a little bit more about, the levels of ghosts. We call them earthbound spirits. We don't usually call them ghosts. The only time we call them ghosts is for, public appearances and because most people are really more connected to that term. Ghost is a cool word. It's hard not to use it. But, we do like to use the term earthbound spirit or earthbound soul, which is what I'm, doing more of because I've said in other podcast shows the difference between a soul and a spirit really gives more of a clearer definition of what's actually happening with the soul in the transition process, which I want to talk a little bit with you guys today. And if we're going to talk about earthbound souls, then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the transition process, how they become earthbound, and what you can expect to see with these earthbound souls, depending on the vibrational frequency they align to, what they're holding, what they're experiencing, how they're making you feel. There's so many different layers that go into all the work that we do. But we're just going to try to get the most appropriate and the most meaningful and the most important information out to you. It's hard to do it in 45 minutes, but we will do our best for sure. So I want to talk a little bit in the beginning about transition. Now, why do we even use that word transition? It is a word that my guides gave to me a long time ago, like 25 years ago, because, everyone was using the word crossing over. And that's a very popular analogy to crossover, because, when a spirit or when a person dies, we say they're crossing over to the other side. And that doesn't really leave a lot of room for the different states of transition. So when I started getting involved in rescue mediumship, my guides were like, don't use crossing over, use the word transition, change, from one form to another form, and the different levels and states of change when they move into different vibrational frequencies. And they kind of threw that all at me at once and like, what? I'm like, what are you talking about? So I do want to give a little bit of information about what they were saying when they were teaching this to me many years ago. And I'm going to tell you the way that they trained me. I want you to take with what works with you, leave the rest, as I always say, because the way my guides train me is through my level of perception, awareness, background, religion, focus, biases, everything that kind of forms me into who I am. And they have to go through those filters to download this information to me. They did give me more of an expanded form of awareness of this because they knew I was going to be teaching people and had to relate to other people that I was going to train. But the basis of the information will always remain the same. The perception of it and the way that it is explained may be different. So just take that with a grain of salt, saying whatever I do train you on, whatever I do explain, just remember it was through my level of perception, which may be a little different than yours, and that's perfectly fine because we have to be different. We all different egos, different personalities, different levels of perception. We don't even see the same color the same. So I just want you to understand if it doesn't sit right, or if you have a different way of understanding it, that's perfectly fine. I want you to stick with what works for you. I really do.
Yeah, we all have different soul history too.
We all have different soul histories. We all have different ways of being able to receive, but not just receive, but conceptualize and process as well. So, and Cynthia and Jordan are going to talk a lot about the different levels of earthbound souls. But I just wanted to talk in the beginning of the transition process. How does one become a ghost? for one. And I think that really should always be the beginning of like, hey, why does this even happen in the first place? And in the beginning of the death process, the soul starts making the decision to transition back to spirit, to leave the physical body, which is a physical manifestation of the soul, by the way. And it's deciding through its own level of consciousness and through its connection to the higher self to return back to spirit form in the astral plane. This decision can be made months, years in advance. I mean, it's made advanced before you even come into this life, but then the soul starts acclimating to that transition and change long before the death actually even occurs. That's why so many people have this feeling like, I feel like I'm something's about to happen. Or I feel like I'm not going to be here. They're moving into the energy cycle of the end of their physical experience. And in that cycle, the soul starts making choices. Should I stay or should I go? Have I fulfilled everything I want to fulfill? Am I still holding on to resentment? It starts just really processing and trying to understand, how far have I come? How do I feel complete? Do I feel like I've accomplished everything? And all of this happens deep within you. You're not going to think it, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel, because people are going to go through the process of reflection during these times, deep-seated reflection. They're just going to start reaching out to people. They're going to start feeling like they have to close up loose ends. They don't understand why they're going to feel that way. Some people go through this, some people don't. It's a complete mystery to them. Even though the soul's making that decision, the conscious mind that is beyond the soul, that is part of the soul but beyond the soul, is in full denial, does not have any clue of what's going on. But the soul's making arrangements. It's packing its bags, it's making its trip plans, and it's getting ready to leave. Within that state of awareness, the other side starts preparing. Your team gets together, your shepherding spirits get together, your higher self starts making plans, your family and friends on the other side start getting together. They're like, okay, let's plan a picnic or a bonfire or a family gathering, intervention, whatever it is we need to do for that soul. Everyone's making plans on the other side. Closer you get to the death of the physical body, the more everything seems to be intense for that person. Now, granted, this can happen all within a few hours, a few minutes, because there is no time on the other side. Mm-hmm. When the physical death happens, whether through accident, illness, aggressive crisis, trauma, whatever it be, the soul leads the physical body in stages. Quite often, the longer it takes somebody to die, the longer it takes for the stages to happen in the soul to leave the physical body. Such as someone has cancer, they've been in the hospital for 3 months, they're in hospice. The soul can start leaving. We will talk about fragmentation of the soul in another episode, but the soul starts making its slow transition, and parts of it starts to transition into the light. What usually stays behind are aspects of the soul that's still holding on good. Wait, I'm not so sure. I think I still have things I have to do. I still feel like, I haven't talked to that one person yet, or I haven't rectified this situation, or I feel really guilty about what I've done. And that part of the consciousness of the soul still anchored here in the physical plane, saying, I still have work to do. I'm not ready to go just yet. When the physical body dies, the soul leaves the physical body and moves directly into the astral plane. Why? Because when you aren't anchored into a physical body that's attached to the third dimension, it's like taking one step up. It's as close to us as just taking a step. And so when the soul is released from the physical body, it immediately moves into a higher vibration. That vibration with its consciousness, immediately moves into the astral plane. So when we talk about earthbound soul, so many people think, well, they're still in the earth realm. They are not. They're hovering just above, still in the astral plane, because they can't be in the physical world anymore because they're not anchored in with a physical body. They're moved into the astral plane, and that's where the transition process starts. Well, starts with just pure consciousness, not attached to the physical body. Once they become part of the astral plane again and is focused on the astral plane again, everything that they feel, everything that they sense, everything that they know, everything that they perceive now creates a reality around them. It's what we call thought emotional projection. Those thoughts, those emotions, that perceived reality of self all create a new world for that soul. And of course, if that soul is able to let go of everything and easily transition to higher states of consciousness, they move very quickly into higher levels of the astral plane, where they're greeted by their loved ones, their family, their friends, their masters, their teachers, their guides, whomever decides to come through to that soul at that time. And that is a whole other show on itself. But we want to talk a little bit about why a soul stays in the lower levels of the astral plane. And that is mainly due to what is anchoring or attaching them to their physical existence. So they'll stay in the lower plane of the astral world and start looking around, trying to find resolution, because they know this doesn't feel good. It isn't the worst thing in the world to become earthbound. And I want people to really understand that. They could be in trauma, they could be in states of crisis, but that's rare. These earthbound souls are choosing, knowingly or unknowingly, to stay in that lower realm. Why? Because their attachments hold them there. It isn't that they're experiencing physical pain. They're not physical anymore, but they are experiencing our grief, loss, resentment, anger, emotions, and thoughts that keep them anchored there. So where they are in the astral plane on the lower levels is exactly where they need to be for that moment so they can have reflection. And during that time of reflection, all these guides and these spirits and these ancestors and light beings come down, and they all start surrounding the earthbound soul at that state of transition to try to help them find that resolution. But as you know, as we've talked about before, these souls have a hard time perceiving this. They don't see them. They don't recognize them. They can't see anything but the thought and emotional projection, the new reality they've created around themselves. And all they see is this, and that's all they're going to actually interact with is what they're perceiving. So when we understand that they're now in a different state, they're now in their own reality, they're now in their own level of perception, they create their own world. And it's our job as rescue mediums to step into their world to try to help them find that resolution. So, did Cynthia or Jordan want to add anything to the state of transition for a soul?
Yeah, I actually wanted to really validate a little bit of what you're saying because um, I was in conversation with a young woman who was living, and she was telling me about a near-death experience that she had. And she was in a motor vehicle, and they were driving, and she ended up getting ejected from the vehicle through the windshield. And she landed in a ditch. And what she said is that when she landed, the last memory is she could remember feeling the grass that she landed on. It was wet, it was cold. And then boom, she felt she was standing in a gray place. And she said, nobody was there, but there was no temperature. I didn't feel temperature. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel anything. I wasn't even afraid. I was just kind of curious about what's going on because there was still awareness.
Right.
And the other thing she said was that she knew somebody was beyond that. Like there was people, there was something out there that she could speak to, but she couldn't see it.
Right.
And she said to it, I don't know, but because she goes, I felt like I was dead, but I wasn't. And she's like, and I said to it, I'm not done. I'm not ready. Like, I'm
Mm,
not ready. She knew that she wanted to advocate for herself to stay because she still had things she wanted to do in the
right.
physical. And the next thing she remembers after that is waking up to the sounds of sirens that were coming. And it had been an extended period of time, maybe 30 minutes or more, that
Wow.
had passed in that short experience that she had.
Yeah.
So the idea of not pain, not you're not in your physical form, you don't have the same sensations, and then on top of you're never truly alone. She couldn't see things, but she could feel there was something out there. And
Right.
the advocacy and the attachment to wanting to still be in this life, just all those elements are in that story. Just that one example.
That's an amazing example for what we will talk about as a level 1. Even though she did make the conscious decision through her free will to come back to the physical plane, which only happens if the physical body is able to recollect your soul, if the physical body isn't harmed enough. So many souls say, I want to come back, but the physical body is unable to receive the soul back due to enough injury or illness that it can't sustain life. And quite often, in those instances, the soul remains in that lower plane in the astral because they can't return to the physical body. And that is one of the reasons why souls become level 1. And we will talk, I have categorized them into 4 levels. Actually, the other side has categorized them into 4 levels just to give some form of structure to an earthbound soul. So when I do teach rescue mediumship in the world, I try to create categories so that people have an idea of what they're communicating with. And the first level is level 1. Level 1s are the earthbound souls that are just started in that transition process. They're on a higher frequency, believe it or not, than the other levels because they're not carrying as much baggage. They're not carrying as much trauma. They've just entered the transition process and something stopped them or slowed the transition or created a disturbance or distraction for that soul. And they stopped in that transition process of moving to a higher vibration. And so they're still in what we would consider the lower level of the astral plane, but not the lowest. So a level 1, think higher vibration of an earthbound soul. These level 1s, like Cynthia was talking about, she had just released from her physical body, and she's in this location or this area she's perceived it to be, but there's nothing there. Now, quite often, a lot of these level 1s relay information that says, I'm in this area that's very gray or very void of color. There's not a lot here. And many mediums have made a term called the gray zone, because it is a state in between something dark and something light. So they've called it the gray zone, even though earthbound souls may not be seeing the color gray. It has the vibration and energy of something gray, something void of, more light and love. Even though she can perceive it or feel it above her or around her, her vibration kept her in that zone. And many, many, many souls communicate with us and say, I know I'm dead. I know something's up. I don't know where I am, and I don't know where to go. And they don't know who to communicate with either. They feel things around them, but they're like, how do I talk to it, or how do I perceive it? Because their mind, their conscious mind, is still connected to physical communication. It is unaware that is now without physical form, communicating in a telepathic or energetic or even empathic way. It does happen naturally, but the mind keeps trying to focus it back in physical form. So this level of awareness now creates confusion for the earthbound soul. Earthbound souls at level 1s, they like to wander. They like to roam. They like to try to look around good. Where's a door? Where's a light? Where's something? Where can I find my place? Where am I going? So when they wander, they look around and they sense things. Mediums, energy workers, healers, all carry a certain vibrational frequency that gives off a little bit of light. These higher frequencies emanate light particles out into the different realms and levels in the physical and in the astral plane. Earthbound souls can see these light particles, can see this energy emanating from these healers and these mediums. And so they feel it, they sense it. It's like a light in the dark. And so they move towards it, thinking, oh, well, this is going to give me an answer. This is going to give me some form of information to let me know where I am, where I'm supposed to go, because I have no clue. And when they connect in with the medium, they don't always see your physical form. They don't know who you are, where you are. They just see these light particles. They see your aura. They see your energy. And as they move closer to you, they're going to know everything about you, who you are, what you're doing, why you're supposed to be here, your contracts, because it's all etheric energy and transfer of that consciousness. So now they know you can help them. Even though you may not be aware that you can help them, they can sense that you have the ability to help them. So you're going to move closer to you and try to grab your attention. Now that's one example. Other level 1s are very focused on something. They move out of their physical form. They start the transition process, but then they're like, wait, there's someone still down there. There's someone that still needs help. Or I have a friend over here. I didn't get to say goodbye to them. Their focus will move their consciousness into a state of awareness and move them to a physical location where they're going to find that resolution. So now they're in a wandering state of trying to search out people that they've known. So a lot of people that have somebody that's recently passed, you're going to sense a lot of what we call haunting experiences, because that earthbound spirit is trying to get your attention to find that resolution so they could detach from the physical experience. And then another example of this would be when an earthbound soul has left the physical body and now they're just staying where they are. Because say they died in a car accident on the side of the road, or they were murdered in a home, or they went through a physical illness really horribly, and they died really quickly in a hospital. They're leaving their physical body, moving into the lower states in the astral plane. They don't see anything else. So what do? They stay where they are until they wait for something to come to them. The longer they're there, the more they merge back down to the physical world, and they can start seeing things that are happening around them. They start seeing people walking down a hallway. They see their friends talking and having conversations about them. They can see things, but they can't interact. They can't join in on the conversations, and they can't be part of the physical experience anymore. So a lot of these souls just stay where they are, waiting for resolution, saying, well, someone's eventually going to come and rescue me because I have no idea where I'm supposed to be going. So level 1s are actually the majority of what we call hauntings and earthbound souls, because these level 1s just don't have an idea of how to continue the transition process. And I don't want people to become afraid, thinking, oh my God, there's so many level ones out there. What if I die and I become a level one? Level ones are people that release from the physical world that, again, we are still attached to the physical world. And I'm not saying because you have dreams and hopes and passions here in the physical world that they're going to keep you here. These are really heavy emotions. These are heavy thoughts. These are souls that have made the conscious decision to say, I'm just not ready to go. So the more at peace you are with the death and transition and return to spirit form in the astral plane, the easier your transition will be. So that's just a little bit of an idea of level ones. There's so many more out there, but I want to turn it over to Cynthia where she could talk a little bit about level twos.
I like that transition, and that you're addressing, by saying that, um, their frequency is a little bit more, and sometimes they're just a little more apprehensive, a little bit more confused, a little bit more that their state in which they passed. And I also like that you bring up, people watching this might be like, I don't want to, stay earthbound. Like, how do I prevent that? Education is a great start, because a
Right.
lot of sometimes what keeps us stuck is the belief system, because that is energetic as well and part of our consciousness. And so I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but when you transition, if you lived a life, we all know life can be very difficult, that there is a lot of suffering in a physical existence, either on a mental level or an emotional level, a spiritual level, a physical level. It can be really challenging, especially if you don't have the right supports that you want in your life. And if you happen to pass and you've accumulated all of this suffering that you haven't been able to get resolution to, and then here you are on the other side. Amy was just talking about the fact that a lot of earthbounds are looking for resolution. Well, when they passed, they weren't able to release that here in consciousness, in participation, maybe in therapy or in making amends with another person. They weren't able to do that. So they pass with all of that. And that is heavy. We know, we can feel how heavy it is, even as physical people living. We can feel how heavy hurt is and how pain is. And we can still have some of that denseness and that heaviness energetically, because thoughts and feelings are energy. And so we transition over to this side, and here we are with this stuff. And so level twos, we say, carry a little bit more drama, trauma, or karma. And so if I lived, even if my passing was peaceful or in my sleep, but my life was really difficult, you still have all that pain and suffering, especially if you didn't find resolution to it. So here you are on the other side with this stuff. And, that's another reason why helping in rescue mediumship souls transition, these souls need a bit more counseling, a bit more guidance, a bit more education, a bit more understanding, and assistance and support, so that they can start to shift their perspective than the one they're left with when they pass, so that they can have the chance to increase their frequency and maybe let go and see things differently and release it. And like Amy said, sometimes it can be very confusing for a soul in transitioning, because when you live a physical life, you understand a concept of time, and you understand that if I want to go from point A to point B, I have to use my, physical body to get there. So it's going to take time. There's this idea of time as well. So over there, it's almost like they don't know how to use their energetic legs, so to speak. They're not maybe sure about how to get from where they are to the other place, because maybe they just weren't a spiritual person. They never felt called to educate themselves in these matters. And that's not a problem. That's not a judgment. It's just what helps us understand why they might feel stuck as a soul on the other side. So they have this trauma and this that they're carrying. And that's just if maybe they're passing wasn't particularly traumatic. Then you've got the perspective if their passing was traumatic. So they lived, let's just say, a regular life. There was, all the different feelings, but their passing was very tragic. Like Amy mentioned, long, painful suffering associated with illness, or that with a sudden diagnosis that was unexpected. Anything sudden and with a lot of pain can be very traumatic for a person. Or maybe somebody did something to them, and they feel like nobody knows that it was that person, and they're feeling like justice hasn't been served, and so they're there angry and confused and upset and thinking about their family and seeing their family confused and upset, right? So you can understand a sense of love and loyalty to not want to transition any further, because there might be this perception is I'm leaving them behind because I don't really fully know what's over here if I keep going this way, right? So you can understand why when you see it from those perspectives. So I have a story that I want to share about this. So I ended up interacting with an earthbound, and this earthbound was in his life. He had an active addiction, and in his addiction, when you struggle with addiction, it's something where it's a very self-centered kind of process. The addiction demands to be number one in your life. And so it's not that you don't love the people in your life, but the way that kind of addiction, embeds itself in your mind and in your body, it wants to be the priority. So this person had this struggle with this addiction, and one night had a fall. And as a result of that fall, ended up passing. So it wasn't intentional. It was an accident, but ended up passing. He remained earthbound, not only because there was an apprehension of judgment if he were to transition to the other side, but also because as he stayed, he was able to watch those that were grieving. And one of those people was his mother. His mother was living and took the loss very, very hard, as she should. This is his mother, right? We understand this is her son. But she began drinking. And that was his drug of choice, was alcohol, his chemical of choice. And she started drinking and developed her own addiction to alcohol. And he didn't want to cross over because he felt guilty that his passing resulted in her now having this problem. And he felt it wasn't right for him to be able to experience that freedom of transition or releasing or healing when his mother's here now suffering. And he knows that suffering intimately because he had his own addiction. So you can start to see that it's layered, and that there still is a freedom of choice, and there still are beliefs, and there still are feelings, and there still are connections of love. But, we just had to have a conversation so that he could understand that he wasn't abandoning his mother, and that by transitioning, there are resources that are available. There are other light beings, angelic beings, guides, family, all these things that are at a different dimension and a different level than where he was at, that could assist. And he could still connect with his mother, but he just didn't feel worthy. And that's a separate issue. So then the conversation had to be about him resolving his own guilt and his own feelings about it. There's a lot more that you can talk about when you're talking about level 2s that are struggling with that kind of energy. But there's so much to say that these are topics that will come up later, because being at that frequency, when we think about how it impacts the living, it's like if this person passed and they're feeling a sense of urgency, like, oh my gosh, I died suddenly, and my some family members don't even know, they live overseas, they haven't told them, and they approach you as a rescue medium and they've got all this angst, you might feel under attack because it's intense. But you have to have that discernment and the skill to differentiate the difference between one of these level twos approaching you in their crisis and wanting help and resolution versus something that has more malicious or sinister intention trying to come into your energy. Because not all anxiety that you might feel is because there's something bad. And that's really, really important to know. You don't have to be, it's something Gigi said, actually, if I could just do a throw out to Gigi is, on one of our previous shows, she said, if you hear something, number one rule, don't freak out. She said, don't freak out. And that's what I'm hearing in my mind. Like, don't always default to bad. I understand
Right.
it's part of our self-preservation, but this is why we're doing this show. This is why we're giving these pieces of information, is we want people to feel empowered, educated, prepared, with understanding, not only for themselves, but to help the souls that they might be coming into contact with.
Perfectly
Does
said.
anybody else have a perspective on level twos?
Well, level twos are a huge category because not only do they fit the description of people that have crisis in death, they carry more drama, as you were saying, but they're also victims to circumstance beyond their control. And this could be attack, abuse. These are what would I consider the victims. People that end their physical experience possibly by the hands of somebody else. These souls still carry an innocence or a genuine love within their hearts, but they died through a very traumatic way, and that was enough to be able to lower their vibration. So they're on the next level in the astral plane below the level ones. They carry that little bit of a denser vibration. So now they can be in a reality where they're seeking resolution, but they're also seeking healing. They're seeking comfort. They're seeking something to make them feel safe again. And so, quite often in their realities, they're still running from the monsters that hurt them when they're in the physical world. So level twos can either really want your attention, or they could be standoffish because they're not sure if they can trust you. They're still in a state of crisis. So they could be running in circles trying to seek resolution and safety, not able to obtain it where they are because they're not connecting to their guides and angels. So again, they're going to see that light spark, that light essence that comes from healers, mediums, and you're going to feel quite a few level twos surrounding you because healers attract wounded people. Our vibration says, I'm safe, I'm comfort, I'm home, I will make you feel better. And so a lot of these level twos will probably hang around and hover around mediums and clears and healers, even if you don't know that you are one. So you're always going to feel like, wow, am I being attacked? Why is all this heavy energy around me? It isn't just because it's heavy doesn't mean it's bad. It just means you may have a few wounded souls that are around you, hoping that you'll help them. But wherever there is a victim, there could also be an abuser, which takes us to level 3. Jordan, did you want to talk about level 3s?
Sure. So, as Amy just said, where there's a victim, there might be someone who has, of their own choice, engaged in behaviors that may have enacted harm on someone else. Right. And that's not to say that some of these souls may not have their own traumas. However, just because someone's been a victim of unfortunate circumstance still does not give permission to enact harm on others. So I want to be very clear on that. So our level 3s are souls that, again, just as Amy had mentioned and Cynthia had mentioned earlier, that, they're surrounded by their own perceptions. And so part of these own perceptions may be pride, maybe feel anger, revenge, guilt, and fear of judgment from the other side, because maybe in their time on the planet and their time in a physical body that maybe they caused some harm to some people. Maybe they hurt others, whether they be physical, mental, emotional. Maybe their actions and behaviors resulted in an untimely death, let's just say, of an individual, or again, just resulted in the suffering of someone else. And so our level 3s are souls that oftentimes don't necessarily carry as much remorse for some of the actions and the behaviors that they did exhibit, and therefore continue to engage in harmful actions and behaviors once they've transitioned into the spirit world. Oftentimes, some of the ones that at least I come around are, those individuals who were abusers, or those who did take the lives of others of their own free will choices. Those are typically the ones that I come across around when it comes to level 3s. That's not to say that the spirit world doesn't provide support and healing to those souls.
Right.
As I said, a lot of these individuals may not have had the greatest lives themselves, and karma gets into play and all that, and we may talk about that on another show. But the reality is that, as I've mentioned before, that the spirit world doesn't give up on offering healing and support and guidance to souls. And so oftentimes working with these souls, if you are a medium that find yourself maybe coming across some of these souls, you may find yourself feeling called to connect with some of their guides, maybe offering new perspectives to these souls to recognize maybe some of their own pain and how that may have impacted some of their actions and behaviors. Again, just because someone may have gone through their own suffering, and that's not to say all these souls did go through suffering. Sometimes people make choices, and sometimes their choices result in harm to others. But new perspectives can be very helpful for some of these souls if you do find that you're a medium that comes across some of these ones. I will say, though, when coming in contact with these souls, you may need to set up a little bit more boundaries. You may need to set and assert your free will a little bit more, because oftentimes they don't really care. Have their own perspective on who's the boss, and it's not you.
Yes.
Sometimes in their perspective. And that's just frankly not the case. You are the authority of your own space. You are the authority of your own sovereignty and your own energy. And you have free will as well. And you can choose whether or not to set boundaries with some of these souls or to continue to engage with them. And there are supports on the other side. I know one of the ones that Amy really nailed home to us in our earlier development, spirit police, right? So those on the other side who may have been, police officers, rule and law enforcers, we'll say, whether they be judges, but those security guards, bouncers, who may come in, and you can call on them and say, hey, I've got something here that's, I've told it needs to step back a little bit. Maybe it's even causing some harm, scratches, pushes. That's not to say that every scratch or push is something harmful. Oftentimes, maybe our level 2s might be coming in a while and a little bit aggressive because they're really trying to get that love and that support and that healing. And there is a different frequency between something that's, maybe, as Cynthia was mentioning, maybe a little bit more anxious because they're seeking support versus something that's coming in to cause some harm or, mess with you a little bit. But these souls are very much at the level 3, very much still connected to their humanity, which kind of leads us into our level 4s, unless either of you ladies have something to add to our level 3.
Well, I would like to add with level 3s that they're really split with them. Half of them have no remorse. They don't care that they've harmed people in the physical world, and know that when they transition all the way, they feel like, oh, I'm going to grow some wings. I'm going to be all light and love. I'm not all for that. I want to remain in the physical plane to continue my abuse upon others. They're so angry and their minds are so distorted by their pain and their suffering that they just won't let go of that connection. Then you have the other group of level 3s that are remorseful, but there's so much ashamed of their actions, and they start judging themselves to the point where they feel, they're grieving the opportunities they had of their change and rectifying situations and trying to find resolvement of that. They're grieving that because they said, well, now I'm going to be judged by the light because I'm judging myself. And if they're going to judge me, then where am I going to go? So they're afraid. So they don't move into the light because they're like, I was a bad person and they're going to, I'm going to go somewhere where it's hot and steamy and, probably be in pain because we have these belief systems, these stories that say that bad people go to hell. So they're going to resist the light. They're going to resist the higher vibration. And so they'll judge themselves, keeping themselves at a lower vibration. It doesn't mean that they want to continue harming people. They move more into the self-loathing vibration, the feeling of anger against themselves. It still keeps them at a very dense vibration. Those particular souls move more into the sadness lower density, while the aggressors that are not remorseful move more into the anger and hate and jealousy, lower dense vibration. And we talked a little bit before in another episode about feeling these dark, dense energies around you. With level 2s, you may be feeling a little bit of fear because it's very heavy. But with level 3s, you're going to feel the very distinct feeling of threat. Because quite often they come in with an intention to harm, the ones that we talked about that are still wanting to continue to harm people. You're going to feel that intuitively, energetically, empathically. And so when they're around you, you're going to get this feeling of direct harm upon yourself that is very different than the feeling of fear. So I want people to just recognize, do I feel fear or do I feel threat? And that will tell you a little bit of a difference between a level 1, 2, and 3. But as we get to level 4, it's a whole new ball game, which Jordan will talk about.
Yes. So our level 4s. Our level 4s are oftentimes level 3 earthbound souls that, through a long process of corruption and intentional alignment with more darker or negative energies, results in the disconnection from their humanity and, in a way, taking on more demonic qualities. What's important to note about these souls is that they are not demons in origin, but because of a nearly indistinguishable at points behavior or energetic presence, oftentimes these ones are misunderstood to be demonic entities. But again, they were human at one point. Why might a soul do this? Well, as Amy and Cynthia and I have been speaking, these are the ones typically I find in my personal experience that they understand to a degree that they've done harm. And it's, well, why would I go, again, if I'm going to go transition and I'm going to go down to that dark, spooky, very warm place, that doesn't sound like that's something that I want to do for the rest of eternity. And I like what I'm doing. I like causing harm. And so because they sit at a lower, denser frequency, well, other energies that are an energetic match to that frequency also may visit them and say, hey, you don't want to go to the light. The light's not going to accept you. They're going to judge you. So they feed off of, in a way, the wounding that some of these the level 3 earthbounds carry. Whether it be their anger, their resentment, their desire for revenge, or their fear of being judged or fear of being left behind from the light. And so you'll have sometimes these other spirits will come in and say, hey, if you come over to our side a little bit, we'll teach you some things. We'll teach you some power. We'll give you some control. Doesn't that sound a lot more fun than having to go over to the light and take some accountability for your actions and behaviors and have to actually look at yourself and look at some of the actions that you've done, how you've caused harm? They're not going to accept you. They're all love and light over there. You're not one of them. Come on our side. And we'll show you what real power looks like. And over time, as we've kind of talked about with level 2s and level 3s, again, they're surrounded by their own perception. And this perception oftentimes is based in fear. It's based in, again, guilt, based in revenge, based in feeling abandoned, even though they are not actually abandoned by the light, but their perception makes them feel that way, and therefore starts to disconnect them from their own humanity. As they start to disconnect from their own humanity, they become much more darker in nature. And I said they get a little bit more different skill sets. And so oftentimes when I see these souls, their form, they might look human, but it's distorted in some capacity. Sometimes I see a more white face, but like darker sunken in eyes. Or I always see this really weird Cheshire cat smile with pointy teeth. They like to do that for me. Some of them will shapeshift. They'll start crawling around on the floor. They'll start doing things that are more what we would consider to be entity-like behavior, because again, their frequencies become so much lower, and they might be engaging with some lower energetic beings that have taught them a thing or two. Some of these energetic beings understand the rules. They understand free will. They understand that there's order. Other energetic beings, because they may not have connected with other energetic beings that may have understood the rules, they don't really know. And so sometimes I find some of these souls are very well aware of the rules and what they can kind of play and where they can kind of, go on that fine line. And other ones have no clue because they haven't transitioned, right? They haven't connected with their guides. They haven't connected with their angels. They haven't connected with a higher energy source and said, hey, there's some rules here. And so oftentimes when I come across some of these souls, they don't care. You can say, this is my free will. This is what I want. This is what I choose. And they're going to say, yeah, I don't care. I'm all powerful. I got all these abilities. Who are you to tell me what to do? Sometimes there's a little bit of ego with them because at their core, they are still human. Yeah. Or twisty in their nature, but still human at their core. So they do have sometimes that grandiose, that ego, because as they've transitioned a little bit more into the dark, oftentimes that ego I find at least, has been fed a little bit more. And so how they may influence those who are in the physical might be through emotional manipulation, right? So feeding off of fear, trying to cause a sense of powerlessness in people, trying to cause mood swings in people, helping people to feel more angry, because these energetic beings, they're a match for those frequencies. And how they might do that is, let's just say you've got some, some wounding, some traumas that maybe you might be carrying. Maybe you have a fear of abandonment. Maybe you've had not a great life, and these souls will literally poke at those wounding, whether it be through bringing up maybe thoughts or emotions, even memories. They can poke at that. If you have a wound that says, you don't matter, they will tell you, oh, you don't matter. No one loves and cares about you. They will manipulate those aspects of yourself because amplifying existing wounding in individuals lowers their frequency and also gives more opportunity for them to influence. And oftentimes these souls, again, they're trying to cause harm. That's a lot of what these souls end up trying to do. Again, through their own twisted nature, their own disconnection from humanity, these are ones that really oftentimes always are trying to cause some level of malicious intent and harm to individuals that they come across. They oftentimes may try to interfere with developing mediums or very well-developed medium spiritual gifts by disconnecting them from their team, coming in and pretending to be a guide or an angel and trying to manipulate and to give false information or information that is very distorted to take you out of your power, to manipulate you further. As I start to get even darker in this space, it's working. Thank you. Point being is that a lot of them carry, again, that malicious intent. And oftentimes when I've come across these souls, depending on how long they've been like this, they might not even remember who they once were.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they don't remember how they became this way. They're much more hyper-focused on causing harm. And they're very targeted and not very stubborn. I'd say very obsessive almost in nature of, I'm just here to cause some trouble. And I don't care what gets in my way. I'm going to do what I want to do because I've got the power here. Because a lot of them have that, again, that distorted nature of thinking that they're all powerful and therefore they get the control. And that's just not simply the case. As we've discussed before, everyone is, you have the authority of your own energetic body, your own experience. We are the keepers of the third dimension. We are, we have free will and we get to choose for ourselves. But these energetic beings oftentimes will try to get you to doubt that. So that way they can, in a way, put their little claws into you and manipulate you in the way that they feel is in their best interest, not necessarily in your own.
Right.
If I can add to that, I want to explain why these level 4s continue to attack, because I know we're running out of time. Level 4s are still souls. They are still very much connected to God. Everything is of God. But they're very much still connected to the light. They're just, the light is diminished within them so much that they become more dark shadow-like. The light within their essence is dimmed even more. When the light is dimmed within them, they don't have as much energy because we actually are energized by our light. It's what gives us everything we need to exist. So when the light becomes diminished within, they need to search out energy from other sources. And in their mindset, they're thinking, well, all of this dark energy feeds me because they're feeling empowered by the dark. So they have this concept and this idea that if they are to provoke fear and trauma and harm upon others, then they can feed off of other people's suffering to continue to feed the battery, to consume more energy. Because when you're in that dark state, you are depleted of energy. So they're constantly in the state of feeding because they don't know what else to do. Now, I want to also remind people, even level 4s can move back into the light. They're choosing not to, but I want you to understand the light is always there, always trying to receive each and every one of us. It is our home. It is where we come from. It is what we are part of. So even though we move away from the light is always within. So the light is always looking to recollect you and move you closer. That's even for the level 4s. So I just want people to recognize, stay in your discernment, keep up your barriers, but don't feed it with more hate. Don't be angry with it. Don't project more dark energy into it. Don't project fear, because that's what it's thinking it needs from you. If anything, project love, because that's going to remind them that there's always a place in the light that they can call home. So, but I believe Cynthia said that we did have a question.
Yes, we do. We do. I just wanted to say one thing about level 4s. Yeah, there is this grandiosity often with them. And it's like, so when I was saying to you, if you're scared, you're hearing bumps in the night, that kind of thing, don't assume it's something bad, because that would be right up their alley. If you think it's a demon, they're going to be so excited, like, ooh, and it just kind of like feeds their ego. Projecting love is the most uncomfortable thing for them.
Yes.
Honestly. So that's well said. Those are good points. So the question that we had, this is a really interesting perspective. So this person was saying, and then I also want to explain something before we answer this. So this is going to the two of you. So how is it different for a soul in the transitioning process as it relates to their religious or spiritual beliefs? And so the example I'm going to give is this, is that there was this man who had a near-death experience, and he followed the path of Hinduism. And when he was having a surgery, a life-saving surgery, and he had a near-death during the surgery. And when he became aware, his first thing was, what is happening? Because how am I aware that I'm here, but then I see myself there? on the operating table, right? So he had the awareness, and that was the first thing that really, he was like, whoa. But then there were family members and guys that had come, and they took him on a little bit of an educational journey, I'll say. And so he went kind of with this, and then the first kind of like spiritual being that wasn't family or ancestral that he ended up interacting with was Archangel Michael. And it wasn't just Archangel Michael, but he came along with Archangel Raphael, and he interacted with them, and they took him on a journey to a being of light that he considered Jesus energy consciousness. And when he came out of that experience, and of course I'm leaving a lot out, but when he came out of this experience, he was talking to his family about it, and they're like, what are you saying? Like, did we get it wrong? Like where are the other gods and goddesses? Like, you know, and he had started a very deep meditation practice and reconnected with those energies and said, am I supposed to be Christian? Am I supposed to convert? And the answer was no. It's up to you what you want to do. There is no purpose. They were just wanted to introduce themselves. They wanted him to be aware for whatever reason for his own journey. They actually wanted him to switch careers, and that involved a lot more healing for people. And so I just thought that was when I, you know, have this question and I think about that story. It's like, where does your mind go with that? What do you guys say about that?
Jordan, do you have that?
My first initial go-to is that the light doesn't judge, and individuals are accepted across, you know, all belief systems and value systems, and energetic beings that are of a higher frequency from the light, they just want to help. They just want to support. So they're not, at least in some of the experience I've had in working with people and talking with folks who have also have similar experiences where they were expecting one thing, but they got somebody else. And the love and the desire to support them never was shifted despite their belief systems or their values. It was, at the end of the day, we're all here, and, you know, whoever's the most appropriate or to give a perspective wanted to come in and to help people have an awareness of there's so much more support out there for folks. And that no matter, I think about what Amy was saying earlier about, you know, coming together with love is, you know, sometimes we as people like to put ourselves into categories, and that can lead to division. And,
yeah,
you know, working a lot in spiritual protection, nothing feeds the dark more than division. And so I just look at least my own perspective and opinion on that is, you know, at the end of the day, the light is the light, and there's no judgment. There's always going to be different beings that want to support regardless of, you know, your own, you know, belief systems and values. They don't discriminate. They just want to support and help.
Well, my answer is very simple. When a soul leaves the physical body and moves into a higher state of consciousness, whomever needs to show up for that soul will. This might be beyond who you expect, and most likely will always be something different than you expect. But it always depends on what the soul needs, the information coming through, and the messenger chosen for that information. Yeah. And at that moment for that individual, these were the individuals that were chosen to relate that information to the soul, because they're asking him to move into more healing modality. So of course, those that are healers and protectors and teachers will present themselves to him. Why didn't it present in his own religion or his culture? Because maybe they were trying to shift him out of one perspective and get him to open up to many, because healers are healers for the many, not just for the one. There are many reasons why certain souls or entities show up for individuals in the transition state. And it always comes back to they know what they're doing, they're presenting who they need to present for a message that needs to be conveyed. And it's as simple as that. You get who you need to get. And that is just in a moment of transition. You're going to connect to many forms of spirits and entities in the light and in the different stages of transition, all in which present themselves to help you find your way. Nothing more. And in their presentation, they're going to present themselves in a vibration and image that they feel is most appropriate to relay that message to you. So I want people to release their expectations of the transition and death process, be open to anything, and understand whatever comes through is what was meant to come through.
Well said.
That was beautifully spoken.
Yeah.
Aww. Well, I think we had a great episode. I mean, this information is just skimming the surface. I mean, really, when I teach this information, it's a 15 to 20 week course, and we were only here for an hour. So I just want you to know, if you do want to learn more about the different levels of earthbound souls, the states of transition, please come see us. You can also visit my school, which Jordan is a part of as well, which is the Spirit Rescue Center. We have all this information and more at your disposal. Just grab it, just receive it, and know that there is no information out there that you cannot access. We're just here to help you every chance that we get. We're so grateful to have you guys here with us, and we hope to see you guys again.